2 in the morning. Sag Harbor, the far end of British-held Long Island. 130 men move through the dark toward a sleeping garrison. No torches, no talking. Muskets loaded, but not to be fired. The order is bayonets only, steel only, silence. They hit the outpost before the guards can shout. 1 shot goes off in the whole assault. 1. The rest is done with the blade in the dark on men still half asleep. Down at the harbor, another group is already at work. Torches to tar and timber. 12 British supply ships tied at the wharf go up one after another. Tons of forage, rum, and provisions catch and burn. The whole waterfront turns orange. And out on the black water, a British warship, 12 guns, wakes up and opens fire on the men standing in the firelight. They don't stop. This is a special operations raid, stealth insertion by sea, silent assault, a target deep in enemy territory. One problem: it's 1777 and the words special operations won't exist for another 150 years. 170 men just crossed 90 miles of enemy water to burn a British base off the map. And they're going to do the whole thing without losing a single man, not one killed, not one even wounded. But how did a colonel who survived a death march to Quebec end up rowing whaleboats across Long Island Sound in the dead of night? To understand, we go back 4 weeks, to a town called Danbury. Rewind to 1776. It was a catastrophe for the American cause. Washington, Quota's army fought the British for New York City and lost badly. The Battle of Long Island, a disaster. White Plains, a defeat. Fort Washington surrendered. By the end of the year, the British held New York City and all of Long Island, and Washington's beaten army had been chased across New Jersey. New York was gone, and it would stay gone. The British would hold that city as their main base for the entire rest of the war. For the patriots who actually lived on Long Island, it was worse than a defeat. It was an occupation. Their home was now enemy territory. Many of them packed up and fled north across the water of Long Island Sound to Connecticut, where the rebellion still held. So picture the map in the spring of 1777. The British own Long Island. The Americans sit across the Sound in Connecticut, looking at their lost homes from 20 miles away. Beaten, displaced, and angry. They about to turn that anger into something. Here's why Long Island's East End mattered. An army runs on supply, and the British army sitting in occupied New York needs an enormous amount of it. Food for the men, and above all forage for the horses, hay, grain. The animals that pull the guns and carry the cavalry eat constantly, and they eat a lot. The East End of Long Island, the farms and harbors out past the reach of any American force, is perfect for it. Rich farmland to strip for forage. And at Sag Harbor, a fine deep water port, a favored point where supply ships come and go. So the British turn Sag Harbor into a depot. Ships tie up at the wharf loaded with provisions. Forage piles up on the docks, waiting to be shipped west to the army in New York. It's a fat, valuable, busy little supply base. And it's guarded by a small force of loyalists. Americans loyal to the crown, with a warship in the harbor for muscle. Out here, so far from the rebel lines, nobody's really worried. Who's going to hit them all the way out here? It's a soft target, a rich one, sitting across 20 miles of open water. Somebody just has to be bold enough, or crazy enough, to reach it. Then the British do something that makes it personal. Late April 1777. A British force under William Tryon, the former royal governor of New York, now a general, lands on the Connecticut coast. He marches inland to Danbury, a town where the Americans have stockpiled a large store of military supplies. And he burns it, all of it. Provisions, munitions, the works, put to the torch. The Americans try to stop him. They fight him on his way back to the ships at a place called Ridgefield. They can't do it. Tryon shrugs off the resistance, reaches the coast, and sails back to Long Island, leaving Danbury smoking behind him. As a humiliation. The British walked into Connecticut, destroyed a supply base, and walked out. And in the American camp, the reaction is immediate and simple. Do to them exactly what they just did to us. The British have a supply base too, sitting fat and undefended across the water at Sag Harbor. If Tryon can cross the water and burn Danbury, the Americans can cross the water and burn Sag Harbor. They just need the right man to lead it, and they have one. His name is Return Jonathan Meigs, and yes, Return is his first name. The story in the family goes like this. His father proposed to his mother. She turned him down. Heartbroken, he walked away. And as he left, she changed her mind and called after him. "Return, Jonathan, return." He did. They married, and they named their son after the words that brought them together. The son grows up to be one tough soldier. When the revolution comes, Meigs volunteers for one of the most brutal operations of the entire war. Benedict Arnold's march to Quebec in 1775, a nightmare trek through hundreds of miles of frozen wilderness that killed and broke men by the dozen. Meigs is one of the ones who make it all the way. He fights at the walls of Quebec. He's captured there. He spends months as a prisoner. Paroled, he still can't rejoin the fight until he's formally exchanged, which doesn't happen until January of 1777. So by the spring of 1777, Return Jonathan Meigs is a hardened veteran who has survived a death march and a prison cell, finally back in the war and hungry to do something that matters. General Samuel Holden Parsons, organizing the revenge raid, needs a leader who is cool, tough, and exact. He picks Meigs. The plan Meigs is handed is, frankly, insane. Which is exactly why it might work. Cross more than 20 miles of open Long Island Sound at night in whaleboats. Small, open rowing boats. No cover, no cannon, in water patrolled by the Royal Navy. Land on the North Fork of Long Island. But the target, Sag Harbor, is on the South Fork, a different arm of the island with a bay in between. So the boats can't just be rowed there. The men will have to land, get out, physically pick up the whaleboats and carry them overland across a narrow neck of the North Fork to the water on the other side. Then relaunch and row again, this time looping wide around Shelter Island, staying out of sight of any British warship, across the bay to a landing below Sag Harbor. Then march inland in the dark. Hit the base with the bayonet before dawn, burn everything, and get all the way back across the water before the British can react. It quote, "as a raid that depends on stealth, timing, muscle and nerve, with no margin for error and no way home if it goes wrong." 234 men, 13 whaleboats. They set out. The first enemy isn't the British, it's the weather. The men assemble at New Haven, Connecticut, drawn from several regiments. They row down the coast to Guilford, the jumping-off point closest to the target. And then they wait, because the Sound will not cooperate. Rough seas, high winds, the kind of water that swamps a small open boat and drowns the men in it. For 2 days, Meigs's raiders sit on the Connecticut shore, staring at the whitecaps, unable to launch. Finally, on the afternoon of May 23rd, the water lays down enough. They go. 13. Whaleboats push off from Guilford, escorted by a couple of armed sloops for protection on the open crossing. Not all of the 234 will go the whole way, but the core striking force, around 170 men, points its bows south into 20 miles of open Sound and starts to row. Ahead of them, in the fading light, is enemy territory. They row into the evening. 20 miles of open water under muscle power, boats low and heavy, men pulling in shifts. Around 11 at night, they reach the North Fork of Long Island, at a place where the land pinches down to a thin, narrow spit, barely 100 yards of sand separating the Sound from the bay on the far side. This is the moment the plan turns from bold to almost unbelievable. The men climb out. They get their hands under the whaleboats, and they carry them, physically haul the boats up out of the water, across the 100 yards of sand, and down into the bay on the other side, boat after boat, in the dark, in enemy country, quietly enough that no one hears. Then they relaunch on the bay side and get back in. They quote for just moved a naval force overland, and they're not done rowing. Now they turn southwest and row again, but carefully. Somewhere out in these waters are British warships. If a man of war spots a swarm of whaleboats packed with armed rebels, the raid is over before it starts. So Meigs takes the long way. He swings his little fleet wide around Shelter Island, keeping the land between his boats and any patrolling British ship hidden the whole way. Around 1 in the morning, they slide up onto a beach about 4 miles below Sag Harbor. They tie up the boats. They leave men behind to guard them. The boats are the only way home, and losing them means dying on this island. The rest, around 170, form up on the dark beach. It takes them about 2 hours to organize and begin the march. Then they move inland on foot toward the sleeping base. They quote for been going since the afternoon before. They've rowed across a sound, portaged their boats overland, and rowed again around an island. And the actual fighting hasn't even started. They reach the edge of the base in the small hours. First, a small British outpost stands in the way, a couple of sentries. The raiders take them silently at the point of the bayonet before either man can raise an alarm. By some accounts, they force the captured men to guide them the rest of the way. Now Meigs splits his force, the way a surgeon makes 2 cuts at once. The main body, around 130 men, will storm the fortified position, the earthworks up on the high ground where the garrison sleeps. The other group, roughly 40 men under a captain troop, will peel off straight to the harbor to destroy the ships and supplies. And Meigs gives the order that defines the whole raid. No shooting, bayonets only. Do not fire, do not shout, do not wake the garrison. Take them in their sleep, with steel, in silence. His men obey it almost perfectly. The assault on the earthworks goes in without a sound, and in the entire attack, only a single shot is said to have been fired. The garrison, jolted awake to find bayonets already among them, has no chance to form up, no chance to fight back as a unit. It's over almost before it begins. The loyalist commander, a Captain James Raymond, is taken in the village, pulled out of a tavern where he'd been quartered, a prisoner before he's fully awake. The base is theirs. Now they burn it. Down at the water, Captain Troop's 40 men are already at work, and it is thorough. 12 British vessels are tied along the wharf, brigs and sloops, the supply ships that feed the depot. The raiders put them all to the torch, and they don't stop at the ships. The forage stacked for the army, the hay, the grain, burns. The provisions burn. The rum, the merchandise, the stores piled up waiting for shipment to New York. All of it goes up. The whole harbor lights up. Firelight throws the raiders' shadows across the water, across the burning hulls, across the piles of supplies collapsing into flame. Everything the British had gathered here, everything they meant to feed their army with, is turning to ash and smoke in the middle of the night. And that firelight, which makes the destruction possible, also makes the raiders visible. Out on the dark water, something has been watching, and it has 12 guns. Anchored offshore is a British armed schooner, a small warship around a dozen guns. As the harbor erupts in flame, the schooner opens fire on the men on the wharf. Cannon at close range, at soldiers standing lit up against the burning ships. It's the one thing that could break the raid. A warship's firepower against men armed with nothing heavier than muskets. Meigs quote as men answer the only way they can, with those muskets. They turn their fire on the schooner and pour it in, aimed shots into the crew, keeping the sailors pinned down and their guns badly served for something like 45 minutes. Long enough. While the musket duel keeps the warship busy, the rest of the raiders keep burning everything in reach. What finally happens to the schooner, the sources don't fully agree on as some say it too was set ablaze. Others aren't certain. But the point is this: a British warship opened fire on the raiding party in the middle of its work, and the raiding party stood in the firelight, traded shots with it, and finished the job anyway. By now, the base is destroyed. It's time to count what they've taken and go. The tally from that single night is almost hard to believe. 12 vessels destroyed. Tons of forage, provisions, and supplies burned. 6 of the enemy killed. And 90 prisoners taken, around 53 at the earthworks, and another 37 down at the wharf. They're rounded up so fast, so completely, that many of them are hauled off in whatever they were sleeping in. One of the raiders wrote afterward that some prisoners had nothing on but a shirt. dragged out into the night half-dressed, some with one shoe, one stocking, and marched straight toward captivity in Connecticut. Now the American cost. 0. Not one man killed, not one man wounded. 170 raiders crossed into enemy territory, stormed a defended base, fought a musket duel with a warship, burned a supply depot to the ground, and took 90 prisoners, and came away without a scratch. Before the sun comes up, they're already pulling back to the boats. The raid isn't over until they're home, and home is a very long way away. Back to the beach, back into the whale boats, back around Shelter Island, back across the bay, back over the narrow neck, back across 20 miles of open sound, with 90 prisoners crammed into the boats alongside them. By the time Meigs's raiders slide back onto the Connecticut shore at Guilford, they have covered something like 90 miles by water and by land, most of it in darkness, in roughly 25 hours. One day, one night, a round trip into the heart of British-held territory and back, with a base destroyed and 90 captives to show for it, and every man who left accounted for. General Parsons sits down the very next day and writes it all up in a report to George Washington. And the Continental Congress does something it rarely does for a raid this size. It votes to present Return Jonathan Meigs with a sword, a formal honor, a nation's thanks for a night's work that seemed impossible. So why does a single night raid on a supply depot matter in a war full of great battles? Because of when it came and what it proved. Remember where the American cause was in the spring of 1777, beaten out of New York, chased across New Jersey, humiliated at Danbury. A year of defeats stacked one on another, with the British holding the biggest city on the continent and looking unstoppable. And then, out of nowhere, 170 men rode across the Sound and burned a British base to the ground without losing a soul. Sag Harbor was the first American victory in the state of New York after New York City and Long Island had fallen. The first win on that ground since the disasters of 1776, a jolt of pure morale at a moment the cause badly needed one. It proved something strategic too, that the British supply lines were not safe, that the water the Royal Navy ruled could be crossed at night by determined men in small boats, that the enemy could be hit where he felt most secure and never see it coming. And look at how they did it. Stealth insertion by sea, a target chosen deep behind enemy lines, a silent assault with the bayonet to preserve surprise, a fast, total strike, and a clean withdrawal before the enemy could respond. Those are the exact principles that armies would one day formalize and call special operations, the raids at Stony Point and Paulus Hook that were still years away, and far beyond them, the commando raids of wars not yet dreamed of. Return. Jonathan Meigs and his 170 men didn't have a name for what they did on that night in May 1777. They just did it. Crossed 90 miles of enemy water, destroyed a British base, took 90 prisoners, and came home without losing a man. And then they rode back into the dark, a century and a half ahead of their time,